Hello and welcome to Sinai Fireside. This is a series that showcases the leadership across Sinai Health. I am Catherine Murray, a proud board member on the foundation, and today I'm joined by world-renowned Dr. Wendy Wolfman. Dr. Wolfman, wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you. I think it's important to start, first of all, you're world-renowned in women's health, and I think that not a lot of people understand or even think about women's health as it relates to inequity. I always thought it was equal. But let's start kind of from the top in terms of what it looks like today.
Well, I think that we're talking specifically about women around the menopause and after menopause, which there has been traditionally inequity in terms of care for women of that age group, and also in terms of recognizing their symptomatology, and then also in terms of research for women as they age. It's almost after women's reproductive lives, they don't count. So I think that's what we're talking about today. Yeah.
And I bring it up in the sense that there's such a focus here at Sinai Health with the Center for Women's Health, Mature Women's Health, that you are chairing, and that I think is gaining so much traction, people finally recognizing how important this is. Talk to us a little bit about the symptoms and how women have been affected by not having enough focus on their health.
So first of all, I want to say how excited I am about the development of the center. This is amazing. We're going to have the most amazing center that really looks at many different aspects of women's health as women age. So what we envisage is a 7-clinic model involving menopause, premature ovarian insufficiency, which is a group of women who really need focused at looking at them. And this is when menopause occurs in women under the age of 40, and the ramifications of that on women's health. Then we're having a clinic for abnormal uterine bleeding. We're going to address vulvar symptoms in women, expand the gynae-urology program, which is a huge problem for women as they get older, looking at things like incontinence that no one talks about, and yet affects a very large proportion of women as they age. And then we're also going to try and address sexuality, which in Toronto is not being adequately assessed. And then we will also be looking at cancer survivorship. Particularly even now, we are going to be starting a clinic for women who have had breast cancer and looking at some of their vulvar symptoms and vaginal symptoms that occur sometimes from the results of the treatments for breast cancer. So we're trying to make this very multi-focused and address a lot of the things that affect women as they age. But in terms of what the symptoms are, the most important symptom that women have with respect to menopause or the last menstrual period and the time around the last menstrual period are hot flashes and night sweats. So they're really the hallmark of menopause, and they reflect the effect of lack of estrogen on the brain. And we now know, with really good research that was done, the area in the brain that is responsible for hot flashes in the hypothalamus, and we have a new physiology with respect to these symptoms. And we also know that women that have severe symptoms that start early and persist for many years have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, even bone effects. And so these are not trivial symptoms. They've been trivialized in the past. They've been denigrated. Women have been laughed at. We don't feel that way anymore. We really recognize that this is a physiologic change that occurs because of the lack of estrogen and its effect on the brain, and then the results of temperature control, because we're mammals and we're obligated to keep our temperature within a narrow range. So that's something that is very interesting and we focus on. And when women have severe symptoms, they may not be able to work well.
Right.
And we know that a large number of women between the ages of 45 to 55 are employed in Canada. And if they have very serious symptoms, it will affect their ability to function at work. And actually about 10% of women may actually quit their job if they have very serious symptoms. So this is a very important aspect of this change of life. And it affects us, it affects our families, our partners, and then also a rundown on the Canadian economy.
Absolutely. Well, and it is amazing because, you know, we haven't really thought about it in that way in terms of women and who are in the workforce who aren't able to perhaps achieve what they could achieve. If you're not feeling well, there's no way you're really going to be able to do that and to put the same amount of energy into your job and into your work and into your career. And what I think is so interesting, correct me if I've got the stats wrong, but I believe that 80% of women do have some type of symptoms. And within that, is it 20% that have severe symptoms?
It's actually higher.
Okay.
So it depends on which group of people you look around the world. And actually the symptoms of menopause are different in Asian countries than they are in North American, and even between different groups of North American women. So for instance, African American women have the most severe symptoms, and then that's followed by Hispanic women, followed by Caucasian women, and then followed by Asian. But more recent studies have suggested that up to 40% of women have what we call moderate to severe menopausal symptoms. So when we define that, moderate symptoms are having a flash and sweating, but it doesn't really impact you in huge ways. But severe flashes are the ones that occur with sweating and actually make you stop your daily activity.
And I think what's also interesting about talking about those symptoms in pre-menopause is that we're in this state for the majority of our lives, different degrees, but if it's not treated or addressed, how does that plan out for women?
So the majority of symptoms occur in the years around the last menstrual period. So when you look at the average length of time that symptoms last, it used to be thought that it was a couple of years, but in more recent studies in the US, the average time was 10 years. 7 to 10 years. And for the women who had very severe symptoms that started earlier, they lasted longer. So some of the figures are that 40% of women still have symptoms into their 60s and about 10% into their 70s.
One of the key reasons why I decided to join the foundation board when I was asked, which was, you know, an honor to be asked, is because there is this focus at Sinai on mature women's health, and it is the first in the world. It's hard to believe that that's the case, but what is your vision in terms of how we can see this progress and what you hope to achieve with it?
Thank you, Catherine, for joining the board and supporting us. We really appreciate it. We so appreciate the support of the hospital. What we envisage is more of a referral-based service, but there are many aspects to the mature women's health. So not only is it providing clinical care, a large part is educational. So we are training fellows who are finished OBGYNs, and what we hope is that they will go across Canada, and we do have foreign fellows in their own countries, and disseminate the knowledge that they will achieve while they're working with us. We're also hoping to establish an important family practice arm and even involve family practitioners in the unit, and hope that they will participate in education at all levels at the university, including postgraduate, graduate programs, as well as medical students. And that's something we already do for obstetrics and gynecology in the residency programs, as well as in the medical school. But we would like to expand the curricula, which currently focuses mainly on reproductive aged women, and emphasize more that actually 30 to 40% of a woman's life is spent after menopause, and that it just doesn't stop when you stop being reproductive. The other important thing is that not every woman will have children. And so this is an extremely part of a woman's life, and it's a very productive part of a woman's life. So as we know, education takes many, many years. To rise up the ladder takes many years. And just as a woman is reaching the peak of her performance time, she may be hit by these symptoms. So women make a huge contribution to our society. We are the backbone of society. We support ourselves, our partners, we support society and Canada. And if we're not functioning well, then really society won't function well. So treating these symptoms and optimizing women's ability without symptoms is really my goal. I did want to speak to research because that's a really important area also that we're going to be addressing in the Mature Women's Health Center.
Right.
So this is an area that has really been lacking. And with support, we're hoping to rev that up. We currently started in 2015, actually a database looking at our patients who are coming to the clinic, both women with early menopause, premature ovarian insufficiency, and menopausal women to gather data so that we would actually get some basic information. And what's happened is one of the fellows I trained, who is gone now, to McMaster, extended that database there, and she has extended it also to other sites within Canada. So that was the goal, that we would extend this database across Canada to get more information. But there are so many things that still need to be looked at. And the third part of the fundraising aspect of our chair initiative is to establish multiple chairs in mature women's health and support people's research. But currently, we're not there yet.
Right.
I do have a chair,
Yes.
which was the first clinical chair in the world. It's the Carol Mitchell chair. Yes, and I thank her very much for her vision and helping us start all this.
And I think it's interesting too to make the analogy that perhaps women's health today is where mental health was 20 years ago in terms of talking about it, focusing on it, putting money towards it, and also reducing the stigma. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I've been working in this area for 24 years and actually recognize this as a huge area that was lacking in my specialty and in medicine. I couldn't, just like you, I was incredulous.
Right.
I thought, hello, wake up. You know,
Yeah.
maybe that was okay when women didn't live longer past age 50. But now we spend 30% of our lives after menopause. And we want to optimize our health so it's not only about quantity, it's also about quality, so we can age in a healthy way and continue to make contributions.
It's interesting as well when you think about some of the symptoms and the ones that most people talk about, the hot flashes and maybe some mood and brain fog. But what about the aspect that I think the center is also going to be addressing, which is vascular and cardiovascular, things that I think that a lot of women don't understand that lower estrogen can have an impact on. Those are things we don't necessarily see. So from your perspective, is there a right approach to address that? In other words, is standard of care that most women should take some type of hormone replacement therapy?
That's a great question, and that's an area that we really need more research in. So as we know, cardiovascular disease is a major killer of women when they age, and that risk accelerates after menopause, so that by the age of 65, as many women have heart attacks as men. And that's not widely known.
No. Right.
In terms of the question you asked, does taking hormone therapy prevent heart disease? It's controversial. Currently, we are not recommending hormone therapy as a preventative for heart disease, but there is some data suggesting that women who take hormone therapy in their 50s actually have fewer cardiovascular events. But currently, it sort of feels like that's a bit, it doesn't make sense, but that's currently what's recommended, is that it is not a primary or a secondary treatment for cardiovascular disease.
It's interesting as well, just going back for a moment, to think about how women manage through their daily lives when they're faced with certain health issues of menopause, perimenopause, etc. And I know that you have a very long-standing relationship with one of your patients.
Yes.
Can you tell us just a little bit about who she is and what she experienced, and then we'll bring her in.
Oh, so Jan, I was very fortunate to meet her, and I was very fortunate to deliver her children. And she's followed me since then, and she had symptoms of menopause, and I think we were able to help her and treat her and allow her to function and work as a teacher and make her the great contribution she did to her students and to her family.
Wonderful. Well, let's meet her.
Okay.
Jan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm chuffed, as they say in Britain, to be here. It's just a cause near and dear to my heart, and a little bit of lived experience too.
Which we want to hear all about. And we should first say that you have been a patient of Dr. Wolfman's for 40 years.
We're going back to the realms of Madonna and power suits, and so I'll try to sort of fill in the blanks. So you both talked about so many parts of the story that I'm just happy to fill in. But yes, 40 years. So
Take us back a little bit in terms of how you met Dr. Wolfman and how that changed your health trajectory.
Okay, so it actually did. And when we talk about being able to do your job, I was 25 years old, moved back to Toronto. I'd obtained my first permanent teaching contract, which in the 80s was a big deal.
Sure.
I was teaching science and English, and that comes into play because I was in my power suit having a moment, and this all-encompassing wave of heat just came at me. I was trying to teach, I think, Macbeth, and I was incapacitated. And I thought, wow, if I didn't know any better, I would have said this was a hot flash, but no, I'm getting married soon, I have a job, this is just stress. We don't talk about those things. And then I thought, oh, this is happening a bit. Maybe I'll just go get a blood test. And I actually met Dr. Wolfman because it was through another doctor with whom she was working who got the blood work back, and he said, well, I've never seen results like this on anybody under the age of 90. We're going to run them again. And by the way, what are you doing in this clinic? Come to my office. It's closer to where you live. And when I went back for the results, he had this lovely doctor with him that eventually took over from him, I think. And periods did come back. But even back then, I mean, I'd been on and off very strong birth control pills. I'd been, who knows what was going on? We really didn't know. So things returned, and I conceived my first child, and of course you already heard who delivered him. And then things got a little more complicated. I was living out of the city, and it took a lot longer to conceive my second, and I just had this feeling. I turned to my husband, I said, we're driving down the 400 and Dr. Wolfman has to deliver this baby. I said, I don't care how. I said, this is what we're gonna do. So then, though, by the time my youngest was 2, the hot flashes started coming back. The periods were erratic even after he'd been weaned. But people are still, oh, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. And what's so wonderful about you is that you never say, oh, it's all in your head. Of course this is working. You never belittled my sense of this is not working for me. I'm really struggling, because I did not come from a family where you had medical issues. You toughed it out. And I just remember it being so lonely. I didn't tell my sister. I remember sort of asking my mom, but she was, dying at the time. And she said, well, I was 51, you'll be just fine. And I thought, well, I'm 34 and I'm not. And you never said, oh no, we're doing it this way, and this is the protocol. Absolutely, of course, you knew all the research, all the latest, and you knew which countries were doing what. And eventually, I ended up on what I call the perfect cocktail, and it was life-changing. It really was. But can I just say that the other thing that's so important about this unit is if I could have a wish for the women out there, regardless of their age, menopause to me is just, and you touched on this, is so much more. I never had the thoughts, but it's so multi-system. It's so overwhelming. It can be incapacitating. We still have these people that are, oh, it's natural. I sailed through. Well, I'm happy for you. But as you said, it's so much more. And and you talked about, the workforce. And I remember teaching a physics lesson, being at the blackboard with chalk in my hand and having no idea which formula I was supposed to be writing on the board, aside from classroom management.
So was that for you, was that the brain fog?
Completely spaced out and had no idea why. Brain fog, I think, has come into almost overuse after the pandemic, but all I know, it was enveloping and it was incapacitating, absolutely. My other wish that, what's so great about what's being done at Sinai is you don't have to suffer in silence. There are the options, there's the stories, there's the network. I mean, I look back on those decades that I didn't tell anybody. There were, other even colleagues in their 30s, they had little kids. They didn't want to hear about,
Right.
I was having hot flashes.
Well, and that brings up the idea of stigma then and still exists today, really.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to break down the barriers, and I think that part of that is with the Center for Mature Women's Health, that even just over the past number of months that we've been doing more events, more and more people are talking about it. It's become a whole nother, I think it's a movement. I really think it's a movement, and we're finally there, and hopefully that's decreasing some of the stigma.
For this group of women under the age of 40 who have not been addressed by society and maybe make up to 4% of women, yeah, it's really a group of women that need to be addressed because there's so many aspects of their lives that are being affected. And we have the only center which is interdisciplinary. We run it with an endocrinologist. In Canada, there are a few other centers for women with premature ovarian insufficiency around the world, but we're the only one currently in Canada.
The fact that we're creating a Center for Mature Women's Health, what does that mean to you, having been going through this for 40 years? What do you think of this?
I think it's revelatory. I think I'm glad education's part of it, because I think I know people that are astounded that it's even necessary. This is so overdue and so important. And I think the list of people, the length of your wait list attests to the fact that there are so many women that need the help, that need to be heard.
And Dr. Wolfman, for you with this center, I think that it is gaining so much momentum in terms of people being aware of this and how important this is. What is your message to the donors who have already participated? And I think there's a number of people out there right now who are certainly considering.
I am so grateful to the people who have supported us. My department chair, Dr. Surmer, also the hospital and Dr. Newton, and also the board, as well as Carol Mitchell, who helped initiate the first chair, and some of the other people who have been so generous with their money. This is so inspiring for me and invigorating towards the end of my career to have your dream really be realized based on the work you've done, but also by the generosity of the donors.
And how do you see this rolling out for the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years? What do you want to see?
Well, hopefully I'll be hanging it there as long as I'm blessed with good health. And then what I hope is that we will find someone to lead the charge on, who has hopefully an international, national presence, who can continue on my dream. And hopefully I'll still be around helping with that dream. And so that's what I envisage, and expanding the clinics. We're planning actually a physical plant. We have reached the first stage of our goal of fundraising. We're halfway through the second. The second part is funding the physical site.
Right.
And the third part, as I mentioned, is funding the various chairs to really make a contribution to research which the sky's the limit. I'm so excited by all this.
Yeah, I think there's so much excitement. Thank you both very, very much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Catherine.
You too. And thank you so much for joining us as well on Sinai Fireside. I'm Catherine Murray, and we'll see you next time.